love the smell of a good tube amp in the morning. Tube amps, that's something we're going to be talking about today. There's no question there's been a lot of chatter out there about the potential survival of the tube amp itself in a digital world. There are a lot of alternatives out there. You've got modeling amplifiers, you've got plugins that in a mix all sound really, really good. So as the number of manufacturers who actually make tubes shrinks, people question how long can a tube amp survive in this digital world? Well, that's something I want to talk about today. I want to look at some innovations from companies like Revv Amplification and Two Notes Audio Engineering that are making some great products that will hopefully secure the future of the tube amp in this digital world. If you want to learn more about this tube amp savior, then join me for this episode of I Don't Have a Band right now. Hey there, I'm Dan, the self-proclaimed lonely rocker. Welcome to this episode of I Don't Have a Band. This is episode number 60, and to celebrate number 60, I've got another collaboration with my good friends at Long McQuaid. That's Canada's largest musical instrument retailer. This is not a sponsored video, but they've been gracious enough to provide me some gear so I can feature it here for you. If you need more information about any of the products I feature here or any of your musical instrument needs, I'll put a link in the description. One of their fine staff will be more than happy to answer any of your questions. Today I want to talk about this little guy, the tube, and specifically the amp that it sits inside. There's no doubt that the tube amp is under siege via modern digital technologies and actually tube amps themselves.
The used market is just flooded with tube amps. The enemy of tube amps are actually old tube amps and not only models.
But for the tube amp to maintain relevancy in the modern era, it has to find its place beside digital innovations. Between modelers and plugins, there are so many alternatives to the tube amp. But why is the tube amp still important? Well, if you're a tone chaser like me, you've been admiring the tones, those massive tones of your heroes like Jimi Hendrix and Jimmy Page, Eddie Van Halen, one of my personal favorites, Alex Lifeson. These guys are using big amplifiers and they've got larger than life sounds. And these are the tones that we've got in our head that we're trying to replicate.
Many of us wanted to buy a tube amps, not because we were sure the sound was better, but probably because our heroes were playing that, right? The 20-year-old kid who loves guitar, maybe his hero is actually playing a model. Maybe will not care about buying a tube amp, even if given the opportunity, will buy another $3,000 guitar and not a tube amp.
So what I want to do, perhaps over the course of a couple of videos, I want to take a look at some more modern innovations that really are in place to help ensure the survival of the tube amp. The battle is over. Digital technology is here to stay. But if the tube amp is going to stay relevant, it's going to have to find its place alongside digital innovations. In this video, specifically, I want to take a look at one of those innovations, and that's a partnership between Revv Amplification and Two Notes Audio Engineering. This Revv D20 is proving to be the first in a series of amplifiers that Revv is producing that has baked-in DI technology. The partnership with Two Notes puts a Torpedo inside of a tube amplifier. And as of the taping of this particular video, Revv has just announced that they're putting this technology in their flagship amplifier. I'll let you check out Revv for more information on that. But it goes to show that they're doubling down on this technology, and it's a really great example of how an all-tube amp can sit nicely alongside digital technology. Why don't we take a look at this a little closer? Okay, so what I've got here is a sort of a very typical way that you would traditionally record electric guitars. You know, got a Marshall amplifier running to one or two speaker cabinets. I've got an SM57, and that will go into my audio interface or go through a preamp, depending on what you have available. My pedals, which I can push through the face of the amp, or time-based effects, which I can put into the effects loop. And that's typically how I would run my guitar amp here. But with the Revv D20, what's different about this, much like a Marshall, it's an all-tube amplifier, but built inside of this amplifier is an innovation from Two Notes Audio Engineering and their Torpedo technology. This is as a reactive load box, basically. And what it does, it can take the amp signal, offload some of that energy, because if you don't do that, your amp might explode, and then take that signal coming out of the amp and running it line level directly to your interface, allowing you to record direct. The Revv D20 does have 6 slots where you can pre-program your cab simulation right on board, or you can bypass that if you want and record the raw amp into your computer and then use Two Notes wall of sound or other IRs for your cabinet simulation. So it's a really great way and flexible way to record. If you want to commit, you can do it right out of the amp, or like I said, you can send the raw signal into your computer and you can shape your cabinet simulation post-recording. Oh, and I mustn't forget to mention that the D20 has a built-in headphone out. How many tube amps can you list that have a built-in headphone output? Yeah, that's what I thought. Now, it's important to note that my channel speaks to home studio guys. If you're a professional with a big studio and a locker full of microphones and great preamps and things like that, especially a big room, well, perhaps it's a different conversation. But I know a lot of pros are recording this way now too because it's so convenient, and in a day and age of efficiency, it's a great way to get the guitar tracks done quickly and have them sound great. Now, of course, the argument that's going to come up all the time is what's a better way to record guitars? Well, if you're in a home studio configuration, and much like me, you're going to have some kind of limitation. If you're worried how this is going to affect your tone, well, move your microphone just a couple of degrees that way and you're going to drastically alter your tone anyways. So if I'm going to make a compromise, it's easier to make the compromise here because the cab simulations are very realistic and they offer a lot of options for you to tweak it even further to get it sounding the way you want it to sound. But the sound originates from the tube amp.
I think one way the market can go is actually what I'm pushing, is designing hybrid amps that are a little bit digital, but only in the part where digital is the best. And speaker sim, digital is the best. For the tube sound, I think tube is good at that.
Now, the way I look at it, if you're a tone chaser, you want to start with the tube amp, in my opinion. I mean, if you're a 100-yard sprinter, you can start at the 50-yard line, but where's the fun in that? To me, half the fun in chasing tone is creating that tone from source, and that's with my pedals, and that's with my tube amp. And the Revv D20, and in partnership with Two Notes, is an incredible innovation because it gives you the ability to record directly. It's all included in one bundle. It's really compact. And the fact that Revv is doubling and tripling down now by adding more products with the baked-in Torpedo technology goes to show that they're in this for the long haul. And I think that's going to bode well for the future of tube amps because now, as I said, this tube technology is riding alongside digital innovations, and I think that's the secret to ensuring the relevancy of tube amps for many years to come. So the last piece of the puzzle that I want to take a look at is software, and it's fascinating to me how a tube amplifier can now sit alongside some software to ultimately help you shape the final sound of your guitar. So let's jump into my DAW and take a look at the software component of this relationship between Revv and Two Notes. All right, so I want to take a look at the last piece of the puzzle. There's actually two pieces to the puzzle, and that's the software component of this experience. Now, the first thing before I get into it is that an IR, it stands for impulse response. If you're not familiar, it's basically a snapshot of the sonic measurements of a speaker. So imagine this Marshall cab behind me. I've got an SM57 I use to record the cabinet. Maybe at a certain angle, there's a certain room effect, and all of that information is captured and saved as a digital file, and then you can apply that to a recorded amp tone. I can actually turn off the cab simulations that are built into the rotary dials in the face of that amp, and that's what I did for this last example that you just heard. And then I used Wall of Sound, which is the cabinet loader. This is Two Notes' cab simulation plugin. Now, I just explained what an IR is, but what Two Notes does is they've created what's called dynamic IR. So instead of a single snapshot, they take multiple snapshots of every cabinet. And what that does is it gives you the ability to move the microphone around. So if you're actually miking a cabinet and you like it a little off axis, you like to bring it back a little bit, you can actually set up two different cabinets at a time. You can change the microphone placement. It's really, really cool. And then they also give you a bunch of other different settings here, some effects built in, some EQ, compression, things like that. You can actually adjust the reverb effect by changing the different room that the cabinet's in. So it's a very, very flexible way to shape your cabinet tone. So let's take a listen to the guitar recorded. This is the D20. I actually used an overdrive pedal and a boost and pushed the face of the amp, and I bypassed the cab simulation on the D20, and I applied the cab simulation here. But let's take a listen to the amp without a cab simulation. If you've never heard this before, check it out. Pretty awful, but it's interesting to hear the relationship between the saturation coming from the amp and then the ultimate effect of the speaker that gives you that sound that we've all grown to know and love. So I'll turn on this, I'll turn on the wall of sound so you can hear the difference now with the cab simulation on. Now it's starting to sound like a real guitar. So what we can do, if I've shaped a cabinet here that I really like, I can actually save that as a preset, and I'll just save it over here on number 3. Replace that. And now I'm going to go over to another application, and that's Torpedo Remote. The Torpedo Remote works outside of the DAW, and this is an application that works directly with the Torpedo built into the D20. And there's a number of functions that it does, but the main thing that it does, it allows you to manage and manipulate the cabinet simulations that are stored on the amp itself. So that preset that I just saved right now, I'll just go to the computer here, and there's my file, and whoops, number 3. And if I click save, you can actually store up to 128 different presets. Now, if you want it to be available on the rotary dial on the face of the D20, there's 6 slots available. So I'm going to put that on number 6. But if you actually have a MIDI controller, you can hook that up to the amp via MIDI, and you can have access to 128 different presets. So if you have a hard time making up your mind, you could store 128 different presets on the amp that way. So 2 different pieces of software. The Torpedo Remote works directly with the amplifier to let you manage the cabinet simulations. There's other tweaks and things that you can do here. That's, you know, if you don't have wall of sound, you don't need it. You can manage all the different cabinets that you've got available here in Torpedo Remote. If you're working with both and you've got wall of sound in your DAW, you can shape your cabinets over there, and you can save them as presets and bring them over here, and then load them onto your amp. So that's just an overview, but just wanted to tie a bow on this whole experience, starting with a tube amp, recording direct, managing your different cab simulations. It's a very fun way to record. It's very flexible. So whether you're the type of player that just wants to get your sounds done, get your cab simulations set up, you can save them on the amp. You can just plug in, record, and you're good to go. If you're a tweaker like me, you can record dry or that raw amp sound, and then you can manage your cabs and apply them later on and tweak them to your heart's content. So it's a very, very flexible system, and will cater to all different types of players. And really, that compromise that I talked about, I actually don't feel like I'm making a compromise anymore. I actually feel like I'm being a lot more creative because I don't feel any restrictions on the cabinet side, and I feel satisfied because my tones ultimately are recorded with a tube amp, and that makes me very happy. Well, hopefully you see in this video that I'm not resistant to digital technology, and in fact, quite the opposite. If you look at my home studio, this studio couldn't have existed without the assistance I get from digital innovations. I mean, a setup like this perhaps 10 years ago would have been far too cost prohibitive to set out in the time frame that I did set up this studio. So I've embraced digital technology 100%, but I am a bit of a purist at heart where I love a good tube amp and I love real instruments, and that's something that I don't want to sacrifice. But I've recognized some of the challenges that I have here in my studio, and that led me to a discovery of some great technology that has really, really helped me. And the partnership with Revv and Two Notes, I think, is a very critical step if we want to keep tube amps relevant. It is a shrinking industry. I mean, there was a time that tubes existed in virtually all consumer electronics, and now it's been whittled down to a very niche industry, maybe high-end audio equipment or hi-fi systems and guitar amps. With more innovations that sort of support the idea that the tube amp needs to be here, well, there's a better chance that that tube amp is going to be here for a long time. I certainly hope so. I think it's the root of creating tone, and it's not something I'd like to see disappear. I hope it's not a lost art or dying art, because if you're a guitar player, I don't think you've really lived until you've got your hands on a real tube amplifier. I want to thank Long McQuaid for supplying the D20 for this video. I genuinely appreciate the support. If any of you guys out there need any information about any of your musical instrument needs, long-mcquaid.com is where you need to go. If you're in Canada, there's over 80 stores across Canada, so never one too far away. So just drop into any location and say hi. Well, there you have it. If you're new to this channel, I hope I've earned a subscribe. I've got a lot of videos on this channel geared to the home studio enthusiast and the home recording musician, with videos hopefully to make your home studio life better. So hopefully you'll click that subscribe button and come along for the ride. If you really want to support this channel, I am on Patreon. Links to everything I've discussed and perhaps some things that I haven't will be in the description below. And above all else, I hope I'll see you again in another video. As always, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. And please like, subscribe, and ring that bell to stay up to date. Remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. There are a lot of great musical projects you can do by yourself, right from your own home. I hope to see you again next time.